I was sorting the morning mail when I spotted the package. Small, wrapped in brown paper, and addressed to Nero Wolfe in a precise, angular handwriting that suggested either an architect or someone trying very hard not to be identified. No return address. The postmark was Manhattan, 2 days old. "Fritz," I called, holding the package between 2 fingers like it might bite. "Did you notice anything unusual about this when it arrived?" Fritz Brenner, Wolfe's Swiss chef and housekeeper, emerged from the kitchen wiping his hands on his apron. "No, Archie, it came with the regular mail. Is something wrong?" "Probably not," I said, but I wasn't convinced. In our line of work, unexpected packages had a way of becoming complications. It was 10:47 on a Tuesday morning in April, and upstairs, Nero Wolfe would be with his orchids. His schedule was as predictable as sunrise, from 9 to 11 each morning, and again from 4 to 6 in the afternoon. He would be in the plant rooms on the roof of the brownstone on West 35th Street, tending to his 10,000 orchids with Theodore Horstman. A nuclear explosion wouldn't get him down before 11, but I figured a suspicious package was worth noting when he descended. I placed it on his desk, centered on the blotter where he couldn't miss it. At precisely 11 o'clock I heard the elevator whine. Moments later, Wolfe's bulk filled the office doorway. 7 feet of genius by volume. He grunted a greeting and lowered himself into the only chair in New York, custom-built to accommodate his 1/7 of a ton without protest. "Good morning," I said. "Mail's on your desk, including a mystery package." Wolfe's eyes, sharp as ever in his massive face, went to the brown parcel. "You haven't opened it." "It's addressed to you, not me," I pointed out. "And it's giving me a funny feeling." "Phooey, feelings." But he approached it with the caution of a man who has made enough enemies to populate a small town. Using his letter opener with surprising delicacy for such large hands, he slit the paper. Inside was a box of polished cherrywood. The lid slid open smoothly to reveal velvet lining and a single chess piece. A knight carved from yellowed ivory, exquisite in its detail. The knight's base had a small piece missing, as though it had been damaged and repaired. "Curious," Wolfe said, not touching it. "A gift from an admirer?" I suggested. "You don't play chess?" "No." He was frowning now. "This is an invitation." "To what?" "The chess club for people who can't afford a full set." He ignored my sarcasm, which was typical. "Archie, there's a card." Tucked into the lid of the box was a small card I hadn't noticed. I plucked it out and read aloud. "The game has begun. Black knight to queen's bishop. 3. Your move, Mr. Wolfe." I flipped it over. No signature. Indeed. Wolfe leaned back, his eyes half closed, his lips pushing in and out, a sure sign he was disturbed. "Mean anything to you?" "Not immediately, no." He reached for the card, examined it, then set it down. "But this is no gift. It's a challenge." The phone rang. I picked it up, stated our names, and listened. The voice on the other end was female, cultured and agitated. "Mr. Goodwin, I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe immediately. It's a matter of life and death. My name is Elaine Haverford." I covered the mouthpiece. "A Miss Haverford says it's urgent." "Is it ever not?" Wolfe sighed. "Ask what she wants." I relayed the question, listened to her response, and raised my eyebrows at Wolfe. "She says her father has been murdered, and she believes the killer has just sent you a message. Something about a chess piece." Wolfe's eyes opened fully. He looked at the ivory knight gleaming on his desk, then nodded once. "Tell her to come at 2 o'clock." I did so, hung up, and met his gaze. Coincidence? Bah. Wolfe reached for his current book, but didn't open it. In my experience, Archie, when murder and chess intersect at my doorstep in the span of 15 minutes, coincidence is the least likely explanation. "So we're in a game," I said. "So it would appear." He picked up the ivory knight, turning it in his fingers. "Someone has made the first move, and they expect me to follow. Will you?" His lips tightened. I do not care for having decisions forced upon me, but I knew he was intrigued. And by lunchtime, when Fritz announced the shad roe with an almond, brown butter sauce, I was certain we were about to find ourselves entangled in a case whether Wolf wanted it or not. I was right, of course, but even I couldn't have predicted just how dangerous this particular game would become. Miss Elaine Haverford arrived at the brownstone at 1:55, which should have made Wolf happy since punctuality ranked somewhere between orchid breeding and fine cuisine on his list of virtues. But when Fritz showed her into the office, Wolf was already in a mood. She was tall and slender, with ash-blonde hair tucked into a modest chignon, wearing a charcoal dress that whispered money without shouting it. Her face would have been beautiful if not for the shadows under her eyes and the tension at the corners of her mouth. She was, I guessed, about 30, and she was definitely afraid. I stood to greet her, but Wolf merely inclined his head a fraction of an inch. I made the introductions and settled her into the red leather chair. "Miss Haverford," Wolf began, "you claim your father has been murdered." She flinched at his bluntness. "Yes, last night. The police are calling it a burglary gone wrong, but I know better." "Do you indeed? How?" "Because nothing valuable was taken, and because my father received a threat last week." She opened her handbag and withdrew an envelope. This came to his office. He dismissed it, but I was worried. I took the envelope from her and passed it to Wolf. Inside was a card identical to the one that had accompanied the chess piece. The message read, "The game begins. Make your move, Mr. Haverford." "Your father was Edmund Haverford?" Wolf asked. She nodded. "He was the curator of the Metropolitan Museum's medieval collection for over 20 years. "I see. And was he a chess player?" "Obsessively. He was a master." Her eyes fell on the cherrywood box on Wolf's desk. "Is that a knight?" "Yes." Wolf's tone was neutral. "It arrived this morning." "May I see it?" Her voice trembled slightly. I handed her the box. She barely glanced at the piece before her face went white. "This is from my father's collection, the Ravenna set. It's over 500 years old. Struck from behind with a marble bookend." His desk had been searched, papers scattered everywhere. Her composure wavered. "The police said it looked like a burglar had been surprised, but I told them father's collection, his chess set, was worth a fortune. If it had been a burglary, why wasn't it taken? And this set was intact when you checked." "Oh, and that's just it, I couldn't check. The entire set is missing, except apparently for this knight." Wolf's eyebrows lifted a 16th of an inch. For him, a dramatic reaction. "I see. And did Inspector Kramer enlighten you as to his theory about the missing chess set? He thinks father must have moved it. Or that I'm mistaken about it being there recently." Her chin lifted. "I'm not mistaken, Mr. Wolf." "Who benefits from your father's death?" "No one, really. His estate goes to me and my brother Charles. Father wasn't wealthy beyond his collections and investments." "And the chess set? Who would gain possession of it?" "It belongs to the museum. Father was its custodian, not its owner." She hesitated, though there has been some question about its provenance recently. "Elaborate," Wolf said. "A collector, Stefan Seat. Markov came forward 2 months ago claiming the Ravenna set had been stolen from his family during the war. He demanded its return. Father was investigating the claim. Wolf grunted. And is Markov's present whereabouts? He has an apartment on Park Avenue, though he travels constantly. Wolf closed his eyes and began the lip gymnastics that meant his brain was whirring away. After nearly a minute of silence, he opened them again. Miss Haverford, I regret to inform you that I will not be taking your case. What? The word burst from her. But surely I have no interest in a battle over art provenance, nor in putting myself in opposition to the police, Wolf said. Furthermore, I dislike intensely being manipulated into involvement, which is clearly what someone is attempting with this chess piece, I intervened. What Mr. Wolf means to say is, I mean precisely what I said, Archie. He cut me off. Miss Haverford, I sympathize with your loss, but I must decline. She stood, color rising in her cheeks. My father has been murdered, Mr. Wolf. Someone is using his prized possession to taunt you. Are you really so stubborn that you'll refuse to help? Yes, Wolf said simply. I am precisely that stubborn. I escorted a fuming Miss Haverford to the door. When I returned to the office, Wolf had his book open, but I knew he wasn't reading it. That was cold, even for you, I remarked. Archie, I will not be coerced. So someone sends you a chess piece, and you're going to let a murderer walk free? I did not say that. He closed the book. Get Inspector Kramer on the phone. That surprised me, but I dialed. After the usual pleasantries, meaning Kramer growled and Wolf was imperious, Wolf informed him about the chess piece and its connection to the Haverford murder. I am returning the piece to police custody, Wolf told him. It is evidence in your case, though I doubt Miss Haverford mentioned her suspicions about its provenance dispute. Even from where I sat, I could hear Kramer's explosion. When Wolf hung up, he looked smug. So we're really not taking the case? I asked. I am not. But you just stirred the pot with Kramer. The police should have all relevant information. He gave me a look that meant he was up to something, but wasn't ready to share. The doorbell rang again. When I answered it, Saul Panzer stood on the stoop, his unremarkable face creased in a small smile. Nero called me, he said. Said you might have an errand. I glanced back toward the office, eyebrows raised. So that was it. Wolf wasn't taking the case, but he was sicking Saul on it privately. Come in, I said. I think we're playing chess, and Wolf is pretending he's not making any moves. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. I was sorting the morning mail when I spotted the package. Small, wrapped in brown paper and addressed to Nero Wolf, in a precise, angular handwriting that suggested either an architect or someone trying. Very hard not to be identified. No return address. The postmark was Manhattan, 2 days old. Fritz, I called, holding the package between two fingers like it might bite. Did you notice anything unusual about this when it arrived? Fritz Brenner, Wolf's Swiss chef and housekeeper, emerged from the kitchen wiping his hands on his apron. No, Archie, it came with the regular mail. Is something wrong? Probably not, I said, but I wasn't convinced. In our line of work, unexpected packages had a way of becoming complications. It was 10:47 on a Tuesday morning in April, and upstairs, Nero Wolf would be with his orchids. His schedule was as predictable as sunrise, from 9 to 11 each morning, and again from 4 to 6 in the afternoon. He would be in the plant rooms on the roof of the brownstone on West 35th Street, tending to his 10,000 orchids with Theodore Horstman. A nuclear explosion wouldn't get him down before 11, but I figured a suspicious package was worth noting when he descended. I placed it on his desk, centered on the blotter where he couldn't miss it. At precisely 11 o'clock I heard the elevator whine. Moments later, Wolf's bulk filled the office doorway. 7 feet of genius by volume. He grunted a greeting and lowered himself into the only chair in New York custom-built to accommodate his 1/7 of a ton without protest. "Good morning," I said. "Mail's on your desk, including a mystery package." Wolf's eyes, sharp as ever in his massive face, went to the brown parcel. "You haven't opened it." "It's addressed to you, not me," I pointed out. "And it's giving me a funny feeling." Phooey, feelings. But he approached it with the caution of a man who has made enough enemies to populate a small town. Using his letter opener with surprising delicacy for such large hands, he slit the paper. Inside was a box of polished cherrywood. The lid slid open smoothly to reveal velvet lining and a single chess piece, a knight carved from yellowed ivory, exquisite in its detail. The knight's base had a small piece missing, as though it had been damaged and repaired. "Curious," Wolf said, not touching it. "A gift from an admirer," I suggested. "You don't play chess?" "No." He was frowning now. "This is an invitation." "To what?" "The chess club for people who can't afford a full set." He ignored my sarcasm, which was typical. "Archie, there's a card." Tucked into the lid of the box was a small card I hadn't noticed. I plucked it out and read aloud. "The game has begun. Black knight to Queen's Bishop 3. Your move, Mr. Wolf." I flipped it over. No signature. "Indeed." Wolf leaned back. His eye. "Mr. Goodwin, I need to speak with Mr. Wolf immediately. It's a matter of life and death. My name is Elaine Haverford." I covered the mouthpiece. "A Miss Haverford says it's urgent." "Is it ever not?" Wolf sighed. "Ask what she wants." I relayed the question, listened to her response, and raised my eyebrows at Wolf. "She says her father has been murdered, and she believes the killer has just sent you a message, something about a chess piece." Wolf's eyes opened fully. He looked at the ivory knight gleaming on his desk, then nodded once. "Tell her to come at 2 o'clock." I did so, hung up, and met his gaze. Coincidence? Bah! Wolf reached for his current book, but didn't open it. "In my experience, Archie, when murder and chess intersect at my doorstep in the span of 15 minutes, coincidence is the least likely explanation." "So we're in again?" I said. "So it would appear." He picked up the ivory knight, turning it in his fingers. "Someone has made the first move, and they expect me to follow. Will you?" His lips tightened. I do not care for having decisions forced upon me. But I knew he was intrigued, and by lunchtime, when Fritz announced the shad roe with an almond, brown butter sauce, I was certain we were about to find ourselves entangled in a case whether Wolf wanted it or not. I was right, of course, but even I couldn't have predicted just how dangerous this particular game would become. Miss Elaine Haverford arrived at the brownstone at 1:55, which should have made Wolf happy since punctuality ranked somewhere between orchid breeding and fine cuisine on his list of virtues. But when Fritz showed her into the office, Wolf was already in a mood. She was tall and slender, with ash-blonde hair tucked into a modest chignon, wearing a charcoal dress that whispered money without shouting it. Her face would have been beautiful if not for the shadows under her eyes and the tension at the corners of her mouth. She was, I guessed, about 30, and she was definitely afraid. I stood to greet her, but Wolf merely inclined his head a fraction of an inch. I made the introductions and settled her into the red leather chair. "Miss Haverford," Wolf began, "you claim your father has been murdered." She flinched at his bluntness. "Yes, last night. The police are calling it a burglary gone wrong, but I know better." "Do you indeed? How?" "Because nothing valuable was taken, and because my father received a threat last week." She opened her handbag and withdrew an envelope. This came to his office. He dismissed it, but I was worried. I took the envelope from her and passed it to Wolf. Inside was a card identical to the one that had accompanied the chess piece. The message read, The game begins. Make your move, Mr. Haverford. Your father was Edmund Haverford? Wolfe asked. She nodded. He was the curator of the Metropolitan Museum's medieval collection for over 20 years. I see. And was he a chess player? Obsessively, he was a master. Her eyes fell on the cherrywood box on Wolfe's desk. Is that a knight? Yes. Wolfe's tone was neutral. It arrived this morning. May I see it? Her voice trembled slightly. I handed her the box. She barely glanced at the piece before her face went white. This is from my father's collection, the Ravenna set. It's over 500 years old. She looked up. Mr. Wolfe, someone is taunting you with my father's murder. So it would seem. Wolfe poured beer from the bottle Fritz had brought earlier, watched the foam settle, and took a long, slow drink. Tell me about your father's death. He was found in his study. Struck from behind with a marble bookend, his desk had been searched, papers scattered everywhere. Her composure wavered. The police said it looked like a burglar had been surprised, but I told them father's collection, his chess set, was worth a fortune. If it had been a burglary, why wasn't it taken? And this set was intact when you checked. That's just it, I couldn't check. The entire set is missing, except apparently for this night. Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a 1/16 of an inch. For him, a dramatic reaction. I see, and did Inspector Kramer enlighten you as to his theory about the missing chess set? He thinks father must have moved it. Or that I'm mistaken about it being there recently. Her chin lifted. I'm not mistaken, Mr. Wolfe. Who benefits from your father's death? No one, really. His estate goes to me and my brother Charles. Father's wasn't wealthy beyond his collections and investments. And the chess set? Who would gain possession of it? It belongs to the museum. Father was its custodian, not its owner. She hesitated. Though there has been some question about its provenance recently. Elaborate, Wolfe said. A collector, Stefan Markov, came forward 2 months ago claiming the Ravenna set had been stolen from his family during the war. He demanded its return. Father was investigating the claim. Wolfe grunted. And this Markov's present whereabouts? He has an apartment on Park Avenue, though he travels constantly. Wolfe closed his eyes and began the lip gymnastics that meant his brain was whirring away. After nearly a minute of silence, he opened them again. Miss Haverford, I regret to inform you that I will not be taking your case. What? The word burst from her. But surely... I have no interest in a battle over art provenance, nor in putting myself in opposition to the police, Wolfe said. Furthermore, I dislike intensely being manipulated into involvement, which is clearly what someone is attempting with this chess piece, I intervened. What Mr. Wolfe means to say is, I mean precisely what I said, Archie, he cut me off. Miss Haverford, I sympathize with your loss, but I must decline. She stood, color rising in her cheeks. My father has been murdered, Mr. Wolfe. Someone is using his prized possession to taunt you. Are you really so stubborn that you'll refuse to help? Yes, Wolfe said simply. I am precisely that stubborn. I escorted a fuming Miss Haverford to the door. When I returned to the office, Wolfe had his book open, but I knew he wasn't reading it. That was cold even for you, I remarked. Archie, I will not be coerced. So someone sends you a chess piece and you're going to let a murderer walk free? I did not say that. He closed the book. Get Inspector Kramer on the phone. That surprised me, but I dialed. After the usual pleasantries, meaning Kramer growled and Wolfe was imperious, Wolfe informed him about the chess piece and its connection to the Haverford murder. I am returning the piece to police custody, Wolfe told him. It is evidence in your case, though I doubt. The doorbell rang again. When I answered it, Saul Panzer stood on the stoop, his unremarkable face creased in a small smile. Nero called me, he said. Said you might have an errand. I glanced back toward the office, eyebrows raised. So that was it. Wolfe wasn't taking the case, but he was sicking Saul on it privately. Come in, I said. I think we're playing chess, and Wolfe is pretending he's not making any moves. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. I want you to shadow Miss Haverford, Wolfe told Saul after I brought him to the office. Discreetly, report on her activities and associations. If she is in danger, provide protection, but do not reveal yourself unless necessary. Saul nodded. He was our top operative, the best private detective in New York, possibly the country, and he charged accordingly. The fact that Wolfe was willing to pay his day rate told me he was more interested in this case than he was letting on. What about me? I asked. Or am I just supposed to water the orchids while you pretend we're not investigating? Wolfe sighed. You will investigate, of course, but not as my agent or employee. I am not taking this case, Archie. Sure, I said, enjoying the charade. And I suppose I shouldn't bother reporting what I find? On the contrary, I am naturally curious. You may share any information you gather during your personal inquiries. I grinned. Wolfe may be the greatest detective alive, but subterfuge isn't his strong suit, at least not with me. And where would you suggest I begin these personal inquiries? I would think the museum would be fertile ground, he said. If you were asking, which you are not. Right. And Markov? A man who claims ownership of an artifact potentially worth millions shortly before its custodian is murdered and the artifact vanishes. If you were investigating, which you are not, he would certainly warrant attention. Got it. Not investigating. I stood. I'll just take the rest of the day off then to handle some personal errands around the Metropolitan Museum and Park Avenue. As you wish, Wolfe said, with the barest hint of a smile. So you may begin immediately. Miss Haverford left 35 minutes ago. I hit the Metropolitan first. The medieval collection occupied a significant portion of the first floor, and it didn't take long to find someone who knew Edmund Haverford. Wearing my most sympathetic expression, I approached a middle-aged woman arranging display cards near a set of tapestries. Excuse me, I said. I was supposed to meet with Edmund Haverford today about a potential donation. I've just heard the terrible news. She looked up startled, then her face fell. Oh, you haven't been notified. I'm so sorry. Mr. Haverford passed away yesterday. How awful. What happened? They're saying it was a burglar, she whispered, glancing around. But we're all in shock. Edmund was the gentlest soul. I introduced myself as an insurance investigator, which usually opens more doors than identifying as a private detective. I'm especially concerned because the item I was discussing with Mr. Haverford was a chess piece from medieval Italy, and the appraisal matter. Her eyes widened. You mean from the Ravenna set? That's strange. Edmund never discussed that collection with outsiders. It's been under review. Review? Provenance questions. Very hush-hush. You should speak with Dr. Winters, Edmund's assistant. He's been managing the investigation into its history. She pointed toward a doorway. His office is down that corridor, third door. Dr. Philip Winters was tall, stooped, and nervous, with wire-rimmed glasses and thinning brown hair. When I repeated my insurance investigator story, his handshake was clammy. The Ravenna set isn't on any insurance schedule I'm aware of, he said, and it's been moved to secure storage during the ownership review. When was it moved? Last week, Edmund insisted, after that business with Markov. He adjusted his glasses. Is there some concern about its valuation? I'm more concerned it might be missing, I said, watching his reaction. His face went blank. Too blank. Missing? That's impossible, it's in the vault. Have you checked since Mr. Haverford's death? Well, no, but... He stopped. Why would you ask that? I decided to push. Because a piece from the set arrived at my employer's office this morning. Winters collapsed into his chair. Dear God, he whispered. Not the night? That caught me off guard. Yes, the night. How did you know? It's the most valuable piece in the set. The only one with a documented provenance back to the original owner, Cesare Borgia. His hands were shaking. If it's been stolen, Mr. Winters, who knew about the set's location, besides you and Mr. Haverford? Only the museum director and security chief, and Miss Haverford. She helped catalogue it last month. He looked up, suddenly. And Markov, I suppose? Edmund met with him last Thursday? Here at the museum? No, Edmund refused to bring him here after their first confrontation. They met at the Garrison Club. The Garrison Club was an old money establishment where rich men played chess and pretended they weren't avoiding their wives. I thanked Winters and left, heading cross town to Park Avenue. Stefan Markov's building was exactly what you'd expect for someone who collected million-dollar chess sets. Doorman, marble lobby, private elevator. The doorman was appropriately snooty, until I slipped him a 20. Mr. Markov isn't in residence at the moment, he informed me. He left yesterday for Washington. Business or pleasure? Mr. Markov mentioned a meeting at the Romanian embassy, he said, lowering his voice. He's expected back tomorrow evening. I handed him one of my cards. Would you let him know I called? It's about the Ravenna set. The doorman's eyebrows rose a fraction. You're the second person today asking about Mr. Markov and chess. Oh, who was the first? A police inspector. Quite insistent. So Kramer was already moving on the information Wolf had given him. Interesting. My final stop was the Garrison Club on East 53rd. I had to use one of our honorary memberships, Wolf. Sometimes takes cases from members and the club reciprocates with a courtesy card. The manager recognized me from a previous case. Mr. Goodwin, welcome back. Will Mr. Wolf be joining you? Not today. I'm actually hoping to get some information about a member, Edmund Haverford. His face registered appropriate solemnity. Yes, a tragedy. The police were here this morning. I understand he met with someone here last week, a Stefan Markov. I couldn't possibly discuss members' meetings, he said, but in a way that suggested he absolutely could, and he looked surprised. As a matter of fact, Mr. Haverford brought a small wooden case. I assumed it contained chess pieces, given both gentlemen's reputations. Would you recognize the set if you saw it again? I'm afraid not. The case remained closed while they were in the public areas. I was halfway back to the brownstone when my phone rang. It was Saul. I'm at the Haverford residence, he said, without preamble. Miss Haverford went straight home after leaving Wolf, but she's just received a package, same wrapping as the one Wolf got. Another chess piece? It appears so. She's quite agitated. She's making calls, one to her brother and another to someone named Winters. Philip Winters, her father's assistant at the museum, I said. Anything else? Yes, Saul said, his voice dropping. She wasn't alone when I arrived. Someone was watching the house from a sedan across the street. When she got the package, they left. Did you get a look at them? Better. I got the license plate. He read it off. New Jersey tags, diplomatic series. My pulse quickened. Saul, Markov is supposedly at the Romanian embassy in Washington. I'd say someone else from that embassy is very interested in Miss Haverford then. There was a pause. Archie, she's leaving. Looks like she's in a hurry. Stay with her. I'll report to Wolf. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was nearly 6. Wolf would be up with the orchids, and I'd have to wait. I spent the time typing up my notes and making calls to contacts at the DMV and State Department about those diplomatic plates. At precisely 6 o'clock, Wolf descended. I waited until he was settled behind his desk, a fresh beer poured, before I gave him my report. He listened without interrupting, his eyes half closed. Satisfactory, he said when I finished. Though incomplete. I know. I didn't get to check Haverford's office or speak with the brother. Tomorrow. He reached for his beer. Your findings align with my hypothesis, which is that we are being manipulated, Archie, but not in the way Miss Haverford thinks. He pressed his lips together. There is a game being played, yes, but the chess pieces are merely a distraction. From what? The phone rang before he could answer. It was Saul again, his voice tight. I followed Miss Haverford to a storage facility in Queens. She had a key to a unit registered to her father. A pause. Archie, someone else was there. They were waiting for her. Is she all right? Yes. It was her brother Charles. They removed something from the unit. Looked like the wooden case you described. Then they had an argument. She slapped him. He left with the case. Where is she now? Cheek. Her way back to Manhattan. But Archie, there's something else. After they left, another car pulled up. 2 men went into the same storage unit using a key. The diplomatic sedan? No, a black Cadillac. New York plates. Saul's voice was grim. When they came out, one of them was on the phone. He looked angry. I got close enough to hear a name. They were talking about Wolf. I relayed this to Wolf, whose face remained impassive. Most interesting, he said finally. It appears Miss Haverford has not been entirely forthcoming with us. Or with her brother. He reached for the phone. Get me Inspector Kramer. Are we taking the case now? I asked. No, Archie, but I believe I know where the missing chess set is, and it is not where Miss Haverford and her brother are pretending to search for it. I raised an eyebrow. And where is it? That, said Wolf, is what Inspector Kramer is about to help us discover. Inspector Kramer arrived at the brownstone the next morning, in his usual state, which is to say, barely containing his temper. He stumped into the office clutching an unlit cigar, followed by Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, his perpetual shadow. Wolf, he growled in greeting, lowering himself into the red leather chair. You're jerking me around. Wolf, who had been at his desk since 9, an unusual concession that proved how interested he was in the case he wasn't taking, merely raised his eyebrows a fraction. Good morning, Inspector. I assure you I have been entirely forthcoming. Baloney. You feed me some cock-and-bull story about a chess piece, and suddenly I've got a diplomat involved in a homicide. Ah, Wolf said. You've identified the owner of the diplomatic vehicle. Kramer glared at him. Anton Petrescu, cultural attaché at the Romanian embassy, currently in New York, not Washington, whatever your sources told you. And he's Stefan, Markov's cousin, I whistled softly. That was a connection we hadn't made. Most illuminating, Wolf murmured. And did you locate Mr. Charles Haverford and his sister's wooden case? Kramer's face reddened. How the hell do you know about that? Inspector, you wound me. I merely made a deduction based on family dynamics. Can the fancy talk, Wolf? Charles Haverford is at the Excelsior Hotel, registered under his own name. We're watching him. And the case? Not in his room when we checked. He's got a meeting scheduled for this afternoon. With Markov. Kramer chewed his cigar. Now, you gonna tell me what's in that case? Or do I have to sweat it out of the Haverford woman? I believe it contains the Ravenna chess set minus the Black Knight that was delivered to me. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Though whether it is the genuine article is another question entirely. Meaning, Inspector, that this case revolves around authenticating provenance. The ownership dispute between Markov and the museum hinges on proving which set is the original. You're telling me there are two sets? At least. Kramer looked like he might explode. You got any evidence for this theory, or is this just a bedtime story you're spinning? It would explain why Edmund Haverford secured the museum set in the vault while simultaneously possessing another set, wouldn't it? One which his children are now attempting to sell to Markov. That's... Kramer stopped, mulling it over. That's actually not bad, but it doesn't explain who killed the old man. Indeed, Wolfe nodded. Your investigation would benefit from determining precisely what item Haverford and Markov discussed at the Garrison Club last Thursday. You think Markov's our killer? Kramer asked. I have insufficient data to form such a conclusion. Well, I'm bringing him in for questioning as soon as he surfaces. Kramer stood. Anything else you're not telling me? Inspector, I'm hurt by your suspicion. Wolfe's tone was mild. However, you might wish to speak with Dr. Philip Winters at the museum. I suspect he knows more about the provenance question than he has revealed. After Kramer and Stebbins departed, I looked at Wolfe. So which is the real set, the one in the museum vault or the one Charles Haverford has? And he wasn't at the Excelsior. He'd checked out an hour after Kramer left our brownstone, which suggested the police tail wasn't as sharp as Kramer thought. I finally located him at his own apartment on the Upper West Side. Mr. Haverford, I said. When he answered, Archie Goodwin of Nero Wolfe's office. We've been retained by your sister regarding your father's death. Have you indeed? His voice was cultured, like his sister's, but with an edge to it. Elaine has always been one for dramatics. Mr. Wolfe would appreciate your input on certain questions. Could you join us at 2 o'clock today? Your sister will be present. There was a pause. I suppose I could make time. The address. I gave him our West 35th Street information and hung up, reasonably certain he would come. Curiosity would compel him, if nothing else. At 10 minutes to 2, the doorbell rang. When I answered, Miss Haverford stood on the stoop, more composed than yesterday, but still tense. I escorted her to the office, got her settled with a sherry, and returned to the front door, just as her brother arrived. Charles Haverford was tall like his sister, but where she was slender, he had a solidity that suggested regular workouts at expensive clubs. His hair was darker, chestnut rather than ash blonde, and his face more angular. He wore a navy suit that had probably cost more than I make in a month. Mr. Goodwin, he said, shaking my hand with a grip that tried too hard. Charles Haverford. This way, please. When he entered the office and saw his sister, he faltered slightly. Elaine, I didn't realize you called in a detective. I didn't tell you because you made your opinion of the police investigation quite clear, she replied coolly. But father was murdered, Charles. I want answers. So do I, but this isn't the way. You must be Mr. Charles Haverford, Wolfe interrupted. Please, be seated. Charles took the yellow chair, avoiding his sister's glare. I understand you recently took possession of a wooden case belonging to your father, Wolfe said without preamble. Charles stiffened. You're misinformed. I think not. You removed it from a storage facility in Queens last evening, after an argument with your sister. He shot a venomous look at Elaine. You had me followed? Mr. Wolfe is very thorough, she said. And yes, I wanted to know what you planned to do with father's property. It wasn't just his property, Elaine. You know that. Wolf cleared his throat. Perhaps you would both care to enlighten me about the contents of this case. Brother and sister exchanged glances. It was Charles who spoke first. It contained a chess set, a very valuable one. The Ravenna set? Wolf prompted. A Ravenna set, Charles corrected. There are two, you see. Charles, Elaine hissed. You can't. Oh, come off it, Elaine. Father's dead. The game is over. He turned to Wolf. Our father was an expert forger before he became a respectable curator. His reproductions were flawless, good enough to fool the most discerning collectors. I looked at Elaine. Her face was flushed with anger or embarrassment, but she didn't contradict him. So the set in the museum, I prompted, is genuine. Father would never risk the museum's reputation. Charles shrugged. But he created an identical reproduction. Years ago, when the original was being restored, he had unlimited access to it. He made molds, matched the aging of the ivory, everything. And this reproduction is what you removed from storage, Wolf stated. Yes. Father kept it as his private trophy. No one knew except Elaine and me. Who killed your father, Mr. Haverford? Wolf asked abruptly. Charles looked startled. I have no idea. The police say it was a burglar. We don't believe that? Frankly, no. But I don't have an alternative theory. What about Stefan Markov? I suggested. A flicker of something, fear, crossed Charles's face. What about him? You had a meeting scheduled with him today, I said. About the chess set, I presume? He stopped, glancing at his sister. Yes, I was going to sell him the reproduction. Charles? Elaine's outrage filled the room. You were going to sell him father's forgery after what he did? We don't know Markov did anything, Charles snapped. And the set is worth at least $1 million, half of which would be yours, I might add. I don't want blood money. Of course not. You'd rather mount some misguided crusade for justice. Enough, Wolf said, his voice cutting through their argument. Miss Haverford, you believe Stefan Markov murdered your father. On what evidence? She hesitated. It's complicated. Markov claimed the original Ravenna set was stolen from his family during World War II. He threatened legal action against the museum, demanded the set's return. Father was investigating his claim. And what did he discover? That Markov was right. The set was looted from Romania in 1944. The museum's documentation was forged, not by Father, but by the dealer who sold it to the museum in 1957. I see. And your father informed Markov of this? Yes, at their meeting last week. She twisted, her hands in her lap. But Father also told him that returning the set would be complicated. It would require approval from the museum board, likely litigation. So your father confirmed Markov's ownership claim but denied him immediate possession, Wolf mused. A plausible motive for murder if Markov is impatient or desperate. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it and found myself facing a man I hadn't met but immediately recognized from Saul's description, Dr. Philip Winters from the museum. He looked even more nervous than yesterday. I must speak with Miss Haverford, he said, his voice tight. It's urgent. I brought him to the office. When he saw Charles, he faltered. Oh, I didn't realize it. Perhaps I should come back later. Don't be absurd, Wolf said. If you have information pertinent to this case, now is the time to share it. Winters swallowed hard. It's about the chess set, Miss Haverford. The one in the vault. What about it? She asked. It's gone. He pushed his glasses up with a shaking hand. Stolen from the secure vault sometime last night. And there's more. Anton Petrescu of the Romanian embassy is demanding the museum acknowledge the set as stolen property. Has he mentioned Markov? Charles asked sharply. Yes. He says Mr. Markov has proof of ownership, documentation from before the war. Wolf's eyes narrowed. And did Mr. Petrescu happen to know the set was missing before you informed identical to the ones we'd seen before? It says, checkmate. Just then the phone rang. I answered, listened, and turned to Wolf. Inspector Kramer is on his way over. He says it's urgent. Indeed? Wolf didn't look surprised. Tell him we have additional guests. As I relayed the message, I saw Charles and Elaine exchange a look, loaded with meaning. Winters just seemed lost. I think, said Wolf, reaching for his beer, that we are approaching a critical juncture in this game. The question is, who is truly the player and who is merely a pawn? The answer to that question would come sooner than any of us expected and with deadly consequences. Inspector Kramer arrived 15 minutes later, red-faced and puffing like a steam engine. This time he came alone, and the moment he stepped into the office, I knew something serious had happened. His eyes darted around the room, registering each face. Charles Haverford, he barked. Where were you between midnight and 2 a.m. last night? Charles stiffened. At home. Alone. Why? Because Stefan Markov was found dead in his apartment an hour ago, bludgeoned with a marble paperweight, just like your old man. The room went silent. Even Wolf seemed momentarily stunned. That's impossible, Charles stammered. I was supposed to meet him this afternoon. Yeah, well, someone got to him first. Kramer turned to Elaine. And you, Miss Haverford? Your whereabouts last night? I was home. My housekeeper can confirm. I didn't go out. Convenient, Kramer muttered, then swung toward Winters. What about you, Doctor? You look like you've seen a ghost. Winters had indeed gone pale. I was working late at the museum. The night security log will confirm it. Until what time? Until 11, I believe. He swallowed. Inspector, are you suggesting one of us killed Mr. Markov? I'm not suggesting anything yet. But it's one hell of a coincidence that he winds up dead the same way as Haverford, right after the chess set disappears. Kramer turned to Wolf. You want to tell me what's going on here? Or are you still not working this case? Wolf's eyebrows rose a fraction. I am merely gathering information, Inspector, as are you. Yeah? Well, here's some more information for your collection. Kramer pulled a plastic evidence bag from his pocket and tossed it on Wolf's desk. Inside was another chess piece, a white bishop, carved from ivory. This was in Markov's hand when they found him, and there was a note pinned to his chest. Let me guess, I said. Checkmate? Kramer glared at me. No, wise guy. It said, the bishop takes the knight. Your move, Mr. Wolf. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone was indeed playing a game, a deadly one, and they were drawing Wolf deeper into it with each move. Most interesting, Wolf murmured. The white bishop takes the black knight, a classic exchange sacrifice. What? Kramer looked lost. Chess terminology, Inspector. The player has sacrificed a knight, Markov, to gain positional advantage. Wolf's eyes narrowed. But who is moving the pieces? That's what I want to know, Kramer growled. He turned back to Charles. You seem mighty calm about your potential business partner getting whacked. I'm in shock, Inspector. Charles's voice was steady, but I noticed a tremor in his hands. And Markov wasn't my partner. It was a one-time transaction. For $1 million, according to your earlier statement. Kramer frowned. Why would Markov pay $1 million for a forgery when he had a claim on the real thing? Because his claim would take years to litigate, Charles replied. He wanted a Ravenna set immediately for prestige for his collection. The reproduction is nearly perfect. But he knew it was fake. Of course, Father's reproduction was meant as a private trophy, not a fraud. Kramer didn't look convinced. And where is this forgery now? Charles hesitated. In a safe deposit box. Which bank? First Manhattan Trust. We'll need to verify that and secure it as evidence. Evidence of what? Charles protested. It's not illegal to own a reproduction. It is if it's used in a fraudulent sale, Kramer shot back. Or if it's connected to 2 murders. A new thought struck me. Inspector, was anything taken from Markov's apartment? As a matter of fact, yes. His place was tossed pretty thoroughly. His assistant says a portfolio of documents is missing. Papers related to his claim on the chess set. Proof of ownership, apparently. Elaine gasped softly. So, someone is eliminating everyone connected to the Ravenna set and collecting... What? Both sets? The documentation? That would be my guess, Kramer said. But for what purpose? The museum set is well known. It can't be sold on the open market now. Perhaps not as the Ravenna set, Wolfe interjected, but individual pieces might be dispersed to private collectors who ask no questions. Then why send pieces to you? Kramer demanded. Why make it a game? Because, Inspector, games have rules, and our opponent wants us to play by their rules. Wolfe's eyes moved to Winters. Dr. Winters, you seem unusually disturbed by these developments. Winters jumped slightly. Well, of course I'm disturbed. 2 murders in 3 days, both connected to the museum. Yes, but there's something more, isn't there? Wolfe leaned forward slightly. What aren't you telling us about the Ravenna set? All eyes turned to Winters, who seemed to shrink in his chair. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Wolfe's voice was gentle but firm. You knew Edmund Haverford better than anyone at the museum. You assisted with his research on the set's provenance. You must have formed opinions about Markov's claim. I merely compiled data. Winters adjusted his glasses nervously. Edmund made the final assessment, and that assessment was that Markov's claim had merit. Yet you didn't support returning the set to him, did you? Winters looked startled. How did you... You argued against it in an email to the museum director last month, Elaine interrupted. I saw it in Father's correspondence. I was concerned about precedent, Winters said defensively. If every disputed artifact were returned based on claims like Markov's... That's not why, Elaine cut in. You were afraid of what else might come to light if the provenance investigation continued. The Ravenna set. Winters's face had gone ashen. That's taken out of context. Is it? Elaine's eyes were hard now. The email specifically mentioned your concerns that an audit would reveal our arrangement with the dealer. What arrangement? Kramer demanded. When Winters didn't answer, Wolfe spoke. I believe Miss Haverford is suggesting that her father and Dr. Winters were aware of provenance issues with multiple items acquired from the same dealer, yet continued to work with him, perhaps even facilitated the acquisition of items with questionable histories. That's a serious accusation, Kramer said, looking at Winters. That would be conspiracy to receive stolen property at minimum. It wasn't like that, Winters protested, his voice cracking. Edmund was trying to save important artifacts from disappearing into private collections, items that had been displaced during the war that had unclear ownership. He believed they belonged in museums available to the public and scholars. So he looked the other way on provenance, I said, and helped the museum acquire items that might have rightfully belonged to others. Like Markov's family, Elaine said flatly. Not just Markov, Winters admitted, seeming to deflate. There were others. Over the years, perhaps 24 significant acquisitions. Kramer let out a low whistle. You're talking about a major scandal, enough to ruin reputations and careers. Precisely why Edmund was concerned when Markov appeared, Winters said. It wasn't just about one chess set. If Markov succeeded, others might come forward. The entire medieval collection could be compromised. So my father was protecting the museum's reputation, Elaine said, her voice bitter. And his own legacy. He was protecting our work, Winters insisted. The scholarship, the preservation efforts, everything we've built. By depriving rightful owners of their property, Charles observed coldly. By ensuring treasures weren't hidden away in private vaults. Winters's voice rose. You, of all people, should understand. Your father believed in public access to art. He dedicated his life to it. He also created a perfect forgery, I pointed out. Not exactly consistent with scholarly ethics. The reproduction was different, Winters said, more subdued now. It was his insurance. Wolfe, who had been silent, suddenly straightened. Insurance against what, Dr. Winters? Winters hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Against exactly this situation. If a claim like Markov's ever succeeded, Edmund could substitute the reproduction. The museum wouldn't lose its centerpiece, and the claimant would receive what appeared to be the original. A fraud, in other words, Kramer said. A compromise, Winters corrected weakly. One that protected everyone's interests. Except the true owners, Elaine said. She looked at her brother. Did you know about this? Is that why you were so eager to sell the reproduction to Markov? Charles wouldn't meet her eyes. I knew Father had concerns about some of the museum's acquisitions. I didn't know the details. But you figured selling the forgery to Markov would solve the problem, I suggested. He'd get what he wanted. The museum would keep the original and no one would ask uncomfortable questions. It seemed like the sensible solution, Charles muttered. Sensible? Elaine's voice rose. Father is dead. Markov is dead. And you... The doorbell rang again, cutting her off. I rose to answer it, grateful for the interruption before things got too heated. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a slim, elegant man in an impeccably tailored suit. His features were aquiline, his hair silver at the temples, and his eyes sharp with intelligence. Mr. Goodwin, I presume? His accent was slight, but unmistakably Eastern European. I am Anton Petrescu, cultural attaché of the Romanian embassy. I believe Mr. Wolfe is expecting me. He wasn't, of course, but I didn't say so. Instead, I showed him into the office, where his arrival caused a visible ripple of tension. Winters actually shrank back in his chair while Charles Haverford's face hardened. Mr. Petrescu, Wolfe said, how fortuitous. We were just discussing your cousin, Stefan Markov. My late cousin, yes. Petrescu's face was a mask of grief that didn't quite reach his eyes. A terrible tragedy. You've been informed of his death? Kramer asked sharply. The police contacted the embassy an hour ago. Petrescu nodded solemnly. I came as soon as I could complete certain diplomatic formalities. Formalities? Kramer's eyes narrowed. Regarding the Ravenna set. Petrescu smoothed his tie. As Stefan's nearest blood relative, I am now the legal claimant to the set. The Romanian government supports my claim as a matter of national cultural heritage. The room went silent again, but this time the silence had a different quality. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move in a game that had suddenly become much more complex. "How convenient for you," Charles said finally, his voice dripping with suspicion. Petrescu turned to him, one eyebrow raised. "I fail to see what you mean, Mr. Haverford." "I mean that your cousin's death leaves you in control of a potentially priceless artifact," Charles said, "if it can be recovered." "Are you suggesting I had something to do with Stefan's murder?" Petrescu's voice was dangerously smooth. "That would be a serious accusation against a diplomatic representative." "No one is accusing anyone yet," Kramer cut in, "but I'd be interested to know your whereabouts last night, Mr. Petrescu." "I was at the embassy until midnight, then at my residence on Park Avenue. Both locations have security logs and staff who can verify my presence." His smile was thin. "Diplomatic immunity is a shield, Inspector, but I have no need to hide behind it. I did not kill my cousin." "Then why were you watching the Haverford residence yesterday?" I asked. Petrescu's eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. "Ah, so you had me followed? Interesting." He shrugged elegantly. "I was concerned for Miss Haverford's safety. Given what happened to her father, and given her involvement with the set, I feared she might be at risk." "That's very thoughtful," I said, not bothering to hide my skepticism. "It was merely pragmatic. Miss Haverford's knowledge could be valuable in resolving this situation." He turned to her. "I had hoped to speak with you about your father's research." "Why didn't you simply contact me directly?" Elaine asked. "I attempted to through the museum. Dr. Winters assured me he would have been ruffled." "Archie," he said urgently, "the brownstone is surrounded. NYPD, unmarked cars, they're setting up a perimeter." Kramer was on his feet instantly, reaching for his phone. After a brief, heated conversation, he turned to us, his expression grim. "There's been a development. The museum has received a threat, a bomb, allegedly planted somewhere in the medieval collection. The caller demanded the Ravenna set in exchange for disarming it, but the set is already stolen," Winters protested. "The caller knows that," Kramer said. "They said, and I quote, 'Ask Nero Wolfe where to find it. He has all the pieces of the puzzle.'" All eyes turned to Wolfe, who sat impassive behind his desk. After a moment he sighed deeply. "It appears," he said, "that our opponent is forcing the end game." "Very well." He looked at each person in the room in turn, his gaze penetrating. "I believe I know who has been moving the pieces in this deadly game. And why?" "Well," Kramer demanded, "don't keep us in suspense, Wolfe. There are lives at stake." "Indeed there are," Wolfe agreed. "And the first move towards saving them is to understand that there is not one game being played here, but two. The chess metaphor is merely misdirection." He reached for the ivory knight that still sat on his desk. "The true prize was never the Ravenna set at all." "Then what is it?" Kramer demanded. "Spit it out, Wolfe. We don't have time for theatrics." "Patience, Inspector." Wolfe turned to Winters. "Dr. Winters, when did you last inspect the original Ravenna set, the museum set, before it was stolen?" Winters blinked, caught off guard by the question. Last week, when we moved it to the secure vault." "And was it complete? All 32 pieces?" "Yes, of course. You're certain? You personally verified each piece?" "Well, Winters hesitated. "Edmund did the final count. but he would have noticed if anything was missing. Indeed, Wolf's gaze shifted to Elaine. Miss Haverford, your father's reproduction, how precise was it? Exact in every detail, she said. Father spent years perfecting it. He even aged the ivory to match the original. Including the damage to the Black Knight? Yes. Each piece mirrored its counterpart precisely. Wolf nodded as if confirming something to himself. And the case that housed this reproduction, was it also a copy of the original container? Yes, Charles answered. Cherry wood with velvet lining. Identical to the museum's display case, but not identical to the transport case used when moving the set to the vault, Wolf stated. Winters looked surprised. No, for transport we use a specialized container, metal with custom foam inserts for each piece. Only senior staff have access to it. And this container is currently missing, along with the set, Winters confirmed. Wolf turned to Petrescu. Mr. Petrescu, your cousin's claim rested on documentation, proving the set belonged to your family before the war. What exactly did these documents establish? Petrescu considered the question. Provenance, primarily. Receipts of purchase from the original Italian craftsman in 1498. Family inventories listing the set across generations. Photographs from the 1930s showing my grandfather with the set. And did these documents detail any unique identifying features of the set? Marks, damage, repairs? Yes, quite meticulously. There was a repair to the Black Knight, a piece of the base had broken off and been reattached, and one of the white rooks had a hairline crack running the length of the tower. Wolf nodded again. Inspector Kramer, I assume your officers searched Markov's apartment thoroughly after finding his body? Top to bottom, Kramer confirmed. No sign of either chess set. And the documentation was the only thing taken? As far as his assistant could tell, yes. Most illuminating. Wolf turned to me. Archie, I need you to verify something. Go to the First Manhattan Trust. Confirm that Mr. Haverford's reproduction is indeed in his safe deposit box. Now? I asked, surprised. With a bomb threat at the museum. Especially now. Time is critical. I looked at Kramer, who shrugged. Go. I'll call ahead to the bank. Make sure they cooperate. Take Saul with you, Wolf added, and bring me what you find, all of it. As I grabbed my coat, Wolf addressed the room again. The bomb threat is almost certainly a bluff, designed to create panic and force a misstep. Nevertheless, Inspector, you should have your men implement standard procedures. They're already evacuating the museum, Kramer said grimly. But if you know who's behind this, I have a theory, which Archie's errand will either confirm or disprove. Wolf glanced at his watch. While we wait, perhaps we should consider what we know. A curator with expertise in forgery and questionable acquisition practices is murdered. His reproduction of a valuable chess set created as insurance against ownership claims is secured by his son. The original set vanishes from the museum. The primary claimant to the set is also murdered, and documents proving the set's provenance disappear. When you put it that way, Kramer said slowly, it sounds like someone's eliminating everyone connected to both sets and gathering all evidence of ownership. Precisely. Wolf nodded. But to what end? A forgery, no matter how perfect, is worthless without provenance, and the original, despite its intrinsic value, would be extremely difficult to sell without documentation proving legitimate ownership. Unless, Petrescu interjected, one had both the original set and the documentation showing ancestral ownership. Then one could approach a legitimate collectors or institutions. Indeed, Wolf agreed. But why the elaborate chess game? Why send pieces to me? Why the notes, the theatrical staging of the murders? To create confusion, Elaine suggested, to make it appear more complex than it is, or to point us in a specific direction, Woolf countered. The chess metaphor suggests strategy, planning, sacrifice. Our opponent wants us to believe we're playing against a grandmaster. Saul and I left them to their discussions and headed to the First Manhattan Trust. As promised, Kramer had called ahead, and the bank manager was waiting for us. After verifying Charles's authorization, which Kramer had apparently strong-armed out of him, we were escorted to the vault. The safe deposit box was large, requiring 2 keys. When the manager unlocked it and slid it out, I could see it contained a wooden case that matched the description of the reproduction's container. "We'll need to open it," I told the manager. "Of course." He left us in the original copy. Saul examined the pieces without touching them. "Looks genuine to me, but I'm no expert." I took out my phone and called the brownstone. When Woolf answered, I described what we'd found. "Interesting," he said. "Examine the Black Knight carefully." I located it, a beautifully carved horse's head with intricate details. "I see it. There's damage to the base, repaired. And the white rook?" "I found one of the castle pieces. It has a crack running up the tower." As I suspected, bring the entire set back to the brownstone immediately. "What about the bank?" "Inspector Kramer will handle the formalities. Make haste, Archie." With Saul's help, I secured the case, and we headed back to West 35th Street. The police were still surrounding the brownstone, but they let us through immediately. When we entered the office, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Winters looked like he might faint at any moment. Charles Haverford was rigidly composed while his sister watched him with undisguised suspicion. Petrescu seemed coolly detached from the drama. Kramer was pacing, chewing his unlit cigar to shreds. Archie, excellent." Woolf nodded as I placed the case on his desk. "Please show everyone the contents." I opened the case, revealing the chess set. There were various reactions. Winters leaned forward with professional interest. Elaine gasped softly. Charles remained impassive, and Petrescu's eyes narrowed slightly. "This, according to Mr. Charles Haverford, is the reproduction created by his father," Woolf announced. "A perfect copy of the museum's Ravenna set." "It's magnificent," Petrescu murmured. "Indistinguishable from the original." "Is it?" Woolf raised an eyebrow. "Archie, please remove the Black Knight and bring it to me." I did so, handling it carefully. Woolf examined it, then looked at Petrescu. "This piece has damage to the base, repaired. Exactly as you described in your family's documentation." "Yes," Petrescu agreed. "A characteristic flaw. It was dropped by my grandfather in 1936. And yet," Woolf continued, "this is supposedly the reproduction. How curious that Edmund Haverford would include such a specific detail in his forgery." Winters cleared his throat. "As I mentioned, he was meticulous about matching every detail of the original." "Indeed?" Woolf's tone was skeptical. "Archie, the white rook as well, if you please." I handed him the castle piece with the hairline crack. Another distinctive feature, perfectly reproduced. Woolf set both pieces on his desk. "Dr. Winters, you stated that Edmund Haverford created this reproduction years ago when the original was being restored. That's correct. And when precisely did Mr. Markov first present his claim to the set? About 2 months ago. So Edmund Haverford somehow anticipated years in advance the exact identifying features that would appear in documentation he had never seen." Woolf's voice dripped with skepticism. "Or is there a simpler explanation?" The room went silent. As the implications sank in, "You're suggesting," Kramer began, "that this is not a reproduction at all," Woolf finished for him. "This is the original Ravenna set, created in 1498. The set in the museum, the one now missing, was the forgery. That's preposterous, Winters protested, but weakly. Is it? Wolfe turned to Charles. Mr. Haverford, when did your father actually create his reproduction? Charles hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I'm not certain of the exact date. Was it perhaps around 1957 when the museum acquired what it believed to be the original? Charles didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. I believe, Wolfe continued, that your father acquired the genuine Ravenna set through Ziki, his dealer with the questionable ethics. Recognizing its historical importance, he created a forgery for the museum while keeping the original for himself. A perfect crime. The museum displayed what everyone believed was the authentic set, while your father possessed the true treasure. If that's true, Kramer said, then what's all this business with Markov and his claim? Ah, that is where matters become truly interesting. Wolfe turned to Petrescu. Mr. Petrescu, when your cousin presented his claim, he provided documentation proving his family's ownership of the set before the war, correct? Yes. Documentation that included specific details about the set's distinctive features. Details that match this set, not the museum's forgery. Precisely. Petrescu nodded. Which is why we were confused when initial examinations of the museum set showed discrepancies. Discrepancies that Edmund Haverford would have recognized immediately, Wolfe added, because he knew the museum's set was his own creation. Suddenly he faced a dilemma. Markov's claim was legitimate, but acknowledging it would expose his decades-long deception. So father had to discredit Markov's claim, Elaine said slowly, or risk his entire career and reputation. More than that, Wolfe corrected. If Edmund Haverford admitted to creating a forgery for the museum, a forgery that had been studied, published, and authenticated by experts for decades, it would undermine trust in the entire institution. Every piece he had ever authenticated would be questioned. His legacy would be in ruins. But he told Markov his claim had merit, Charles objected. A stalling tactic, Wolfe said. He acknowledged the claim privately while insisting on a lengthy process to validate it publicly. A process he never intended to complete. And Markov grew impatient, I suggested. Possibly. Wolfe didn't sound convinced. But there's a more sinister possibility. What if someone else learned of both sets, the original and the forgery, and saw an opportunity? An opportunity for what? Kramer asked. To acquire both the genuine Ravenna set and the documentation proving its provenance. With those items, one could approach a private collector or foreign institution and sell the set for many times its market value with perfect legitimacy. But who? Kramer started, then stopped as his phone rang. He answered it, listened briefly, and his face hardened. Where? A pause. Secure the scene. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at Wolfe. There's been another murder. Anton Petrescu's assistant, found at the Romanian embassy, shot through the head. Petrescu's face showed genuine shock. Nikolai, but why? Because he knew too much, Wolfe said quietly, just as Edmund Haverford knew too much, and Stefan Markov. This was never about chess, Inspector. It was about eliminating witnesses and gathering all the elements necessary to provide an explanation from Markov's apartment. And is missing only one element, Wolfe finished. Verification from an unimpeachable authority that the documentation matches the set. His eyes moved deliberately to Dr. Winters. An authority like the assistant curator who helped investigate the provenance claims. All eyes turned to Winters, who had gone deathly pale. Philip? Elaine's voice was barely a whisper. Did you? I didn't kill anyone, Winters burst out. I swear it! But you know who did, Wolf stated flatly. Don't you? Winters' hands were shaking violently now. I can't. They'll kill me too. We can protect you, Kramer said, but you need to tell us everything. Winters looked around the room, his eyes wild with fear. Then abruptly, he slumped in defeat. It was supposed to be simple, he whispered. Just authentication, expert to expert. I never imagined there would be murders. Who? Kramer pressed. Give me a name. Before Winters could answer, the lights in the brownstone went out, plunging the office into sudden darkness. Darkness and chaos are a bad combination in a room full of murder suspects. I heard chairs scraping, gasps, and Kramer barking orders. I reached for my pocket flashlight and clicked it on just in time to see a shadow darting toward the door. Stop him, I shouted, lunging after the figure. There was a crash, a grunt of pain, and when I swung my light in that direction, I saw Saul Panzer on the floor, wrestling with Dr. Winters. The nervous curator had made a break for it. Enough, Wolf said calmly from behind his desk. The emergency generator kicked in and the lights flickered back to partial power. Mr. Panzer, please secure Dr. Winters in the front room with one of Inspector Kramer's officers. Saul nodded, hauling Winters to his feet. Kramer signaled to a uniformed officer who had rushed in at the sound of the commotion, and together they escorted the trembling curator out. A convenient power outage, Wolf remarked. Affecting only this building, I suspect. Kramer was already on his phone, confirming just that. Wolf, this is getting out of hand. Someone's playing games with us. Not games, Inspector. A deadly, serious endgame. Wolf turned to Petrescu, who had remained seated during the brief chaos. Mr. Petrescu, did your cousin bring the provenance documentation with him when he first approached the museum? No, Petrescu replied. He presented copies initially. The originals remained secure at the embassy. In your care? In our secure diplomatic vault. Petrescu's face tightened. Which is why Nikolai's murder is so alarming. He was one of only 3 people with access to that vault. The others being? Myself and the ambassador. I see. Wolf's eyes moved to Charles Haverford, who had been unusually quiet. Mr. Haverford, when did you first learn that your father possessed the original Ravenna set rather than a reproduction? Charles stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Come, sir, the charade is over. Your father created a masterful forgery for the museum while keeping the genuine article. When did you discover the truth? After a long silence, Charles sighed. About a year ago. Father was ill. Early stages of dementia. During a lucid moment, he confessed everything. He was proud of it, actually, fooling the experts for decades. And you decided to profit from his deception, Wolf said flatly. I planned to sell the set, yes, but only after Father's death, and only to a legitimate buyer who would appreciate its historical significance. Like Stefan Markov, I suggested. Markov was ideal. He had a legitimate claim, the financial resources, and a passion for chess history. Charles spread his hand. It would have been a clean transaction, the set returning to its rightful historical owner. For $1 million, Elaine interjected bitterly. The value of 60 years of expert care and preservation, Charles shot back. What would you have had me do? Turn it over to the museum and expose Father's fraud? Destroy his legacy? Perhaps honor his wishes, Elaine suggested. He kept it secret for a reason. His reasons died with him, Charles snapped. Not entirely, Wolf interjected. We can deduce his reasoning from his actions. Edmund Haverford was a scholar first and foremost. He believed valuable artifacts belonged in public institutions, not private collections, yet he personally hoarded the original Ravenna set for decades. Why? Because he couldn't reveal it without admitting to the forgery, I suggested. Precisely. He created a prison of his own making. The longer the deception continued, the more impossible it became to correct. Wolf's eyes narrowed. But there was another factor, the dealer who sold him the set. Alexei Kuznetsov. Winters's voice came. From the doorway, he had returned, flanked by Saul and the officer. His earlier panic seemed to have subsided into resignation. "I'll tell you everything. Just promise me protection." Kramer nodded. "Start talking." Winters sank back into his chair. Kuznetsov was Edmund's primary source for medieval artifacts. From Eastern Europe, he had connections, could acquire items no one else could access, but his methods were questionable. "He dealt in looted art," Wolf stated. "Yes. Items displaced during and after the war, some stolen from Jewish families, others from old aristocratic collections in countries that fell under Soviet control." Winters removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Edmund knew, but he rationalized it. He believed these treasures would otherwise be lost, destroyed, or hidden away. So he created a system, Wolf prompted. Kuznetsov supplied the artifacts, Haverford authenticated them with altered provenance, and the museum acquired pieces it otherwise couldn't. Yes. Edmund became an expert at creating documentation, aging paper, formulating period-appropriate inks. Winters glanced at Charles and Elaine. He wasn't proud of it, but he believed the ends justified the means. "And the Ravenna set was part of this scheme?" Kramer asked. "No, that was different. When Kuznetsov brought him the set in 1957, Edmund recognized its extraordinary value immediately. Instead of following the usual procedure, he created the forgery for the museum and kept the original himself." "Why?" Elaine asked, her voice pained. "Why that one piece?" "Because of its provenance. It had belonged to Cesare Borgia, then to Lucrezia. Borgia then passed through the hands of some of the most infamous figures in European history. Edmund called it cursed. Every owner had met a violent end." Winters gave a bitter laugh. He said no museum should bear that responsibility. "A convenient superstition to justify personal acquisition," Wolf observed. "Perhaps. But Edmund never intended it to leave his possession. It was his secret Edmund never intended it to leave his possession. It was his secret obsession, his private triumph." Winters looked at Charles. "He would never have approved of selling it." "You didn't answer Wolf's question earlier," Kramer cut in. "Who's behind these murders? Who's been collecting the set, the documentation, and eliminating witnesses?" Winters swallowed hard. "I didn't know about the murders until today, I swear. I thought it was just about authenticating the set for a private collector." He took a deep breath. "It's Kuznetsov, Alexei Kuznetsov." "The original dealer?" I asked, surprised. "He'd be ancient by now." "Not Alexei. His son, Victor. He took over his father's business in the 90s, expanded it, made connections with oligarchs, collectors who don't ask questions." "And how did Victor Kuznetsov learn about the two sets?" Wolf asked. "From me," Winters admitted miserably. "When Markov appeared with his claim 2 months ago, I panicked. I knew examining the museum set would expose it as a forgery. I reached out to Victor for advice. We'd done business before." "You were continuing Edmund Haverford's arrangements," Wolf concluded, "acquiring questionable items through Kuznetsov's network, only occasionally, for special pieces." Winters looked down at his hands. Victor saw an opportunity. He said if he could acquire both sets and the documentation, he had a buyer willing to pay 8 figures. All I had to do was authenticate that the original set matched Markov's documentation. And did you? Yes, last week. I told him the set Charles had was indeed the original, matching all the identifying markers in Markov's papers. After which Edmund Haverford was murdered, Wolfe noted. Followed by Markov and now Petrescu's assistant. Victor is eliminating anyone who could expose his scheme. But why send the chess pieces to you? Kramer asked. Why make it so theatrical? A diversion, Wolfe replied. By creating an elaborate puzzle, he focused our attention on chess metaphors and games rather than the straightforward facts. And he used the curse of the Ravenna set to suggest a melodramatic motive. There's something else, Winters said hesitantly. Something about the Black Knight, specifically. Yes, Wolfe prompted. According to Markov's documentation, the knight contains a hidden compartment. Cesare Borgia supposedly concealed a small ruby inside it, a drop of blood symbolizing the knight's loyalty. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. You never examined it? No, finding it would require damaging the piece, which Edmund would never allow. Wolfe reached for the Black Knight that still sat on his desk. He examined it carefully, his large fingers surprisingly delicate as they probed the ivory. Archie, my magnifying glass, please. I handed it to him, and he spent several minutes studying the piece, turning it over repeatedly. Finally, he nodded. There is indeed a seam, very skillfully concealed in the repair work. He looked up. Did Victor Kuznetsov know about this hidden compartment? Yes. It was detailed in Markov's documentation. And would this ruby significantly increase the set's value? Enormously. Not just financially, but historically. It would confirm the Borgia provenance beyond any doubt. Wolfe set the knight down. So we have Victor Kuznetsov, arms dealer, and trafficker in stolen art, orchestrating an elaborate scheme to acquire a chess set worth millions, potentially containing a historical treasure. He has already killed 3 people and is attempting to divert our investigation with chess symbolism and bomb threats. He turned to Kramer. I would suggest, Inspector, that apprehending Mr. Kuznetsov is now your highest priority. Already on it, Kramer growled. APB went out when Winters gave us the name. He glared at Wolfe. But we still don't have the museum's set, forged or not. And there's still a bomb threat. The bomb threat is a diversion, as I said. Wolfe paused. As for the museum set, I believe Dr. Winters can enlighten us. All eyes turned to Winters, who shifted uncomfortably. I don't know where it is, but you know who took it, Wolfe pressed. Victor had someone inside the museum, security clearance, access to the vault. I never knew who. But you know where Victor is staying in New York, don't you? Wolfe's voice was soft, but insistent. Winters nodded reluctantly. He has a penthouse at the Marchand on Central Park South, but he'll be gone by now. He always has an exit strategy. Kramer was already on his phone, dispatching officers to the address. There's one more thing, Winters added, his voice barely audible. Victor said after the sale was complete, he'd need one more authentication from someone with an unimpeachable reputation. He looked directly at Wolfe. He planned to force you to verify the set's authenticity, Mr. Wolfe. That's why he sent you the pieces. To involve you in the case. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. The notes, the chess metaphors, it was all to make sure Wolfe would be invested in the outcome. and to establish him as part of the investigation, Kramer added, so his authentication would carry weight. How did he intend to force my cooperation? Wolf asked calmly. Winters looked away. He didn't share that detail, but Victor doesn't make idle threats. The phone rang. I answered it, listened briefly, then turned to Kramer. Inspector, your men at the penthouse report it's empty. Completely cleaned out. No sign of Kuznetsov or the chess set. Damn it! Kramer slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. He's in the wind. Perhaps not, Wolf said thoughtfully. Mr. Petrescu, you mentioned your cousin had a meeting scheduled with Charles Haverford today to purchase the reproduction, as he believed. Yes, at 4 o'clock, at Markov's apartment, which is now a crime scene, Kramer noted. Indeed, but if Viktor Kuznetsov was monitoring Markov's arrangements, he would know about this meeting, and he would need to secure the original set, the one Charles possesses, to complete his collection. You think he'll try to steal it from me? Charles asked, alarmed. I think he's already planning his approach, Wolf replied. The chess set on my desk is now the only piece of the puzzle he's missing. Then we use it as bait, Kramer said, catching on. Set a trap. Precisely. Wolf nodded. But we must be convincing. Viktor Kuznetsov is not a man easily fooled. What do you propose? Kramer asked. We proceed with Charles Haverford's meeting, but with a different buyer. Wolf's eyes swept the room. We need to lure Kuznetsov into making his move while ensuring the safety of everyone involved. I'll coordinate with Tactical, Kramer said, already reaching for his phone. Set up surveillance. Position officers. No, Wolf shook his head. Too obvious. Kuznetsov will have his own surveillance. One misstep, and he'll disappear. He turned to me. Archie, I need you to make a phone call. To whom? Fred Durkin and Ori Cather. We need additional eyes that won't be recognized. As I went to the phone, Wolf continued outlining his plan. Charles will proceed as if the meeting with Markov is still occurring. He will bring the chess set to the location. Mr. Petrescu, you will contact the Romanian embassy and inform them that you are pursuing your cousin's business interests, including the acquisition of the Ravenna set. Make it clear you're acting in an official capacity. You're using us as bait, Elaine said, not as a question. I am creating the scenario that Kuznetsov cannot resist, Wolf corrected. A chance to complete his collection and eliminate the remaining loose ends. It's dangerous, Kramer objected. Less dangerous than allowing him to set the terms of engagement. Wolf's gaze was steady. Viktor Kuznetsov has already demonstrated his willingness to kill. We must end this game before more lives are lost. As I arranged for Fred and Ori to join our operation, I watched Wolf organizing the players like pieces on a chessboard. The irony wasn't lost on me. For someone who claimed to hate being manipulated into a case, he was now fully committed to bringing down a killer who had made the fatal mistake of trying to use Nero Wolfe as a pawn. The trap was set. All that remained was to see who would make the next move, and whether it would lead to checkmate or to another body. By 6 o'clock that evening, all pieces were in position. Wolf had insisted on using Markov's apartment as the meeting location. The scene is already set, he'd said, and Kramer had reluctantly cleared it with his forensics team. Charles Haverford would arrive with the chess set at 7, as originally planned with Markov. Petrescu would attend as his cousin's representative and executor. Saul Panzer would be positioned in the service elevator corridor, Fred Durkin in the lobby, and Ori Cather in a parked car across the street. I would accompany Charles and Petrescu, posing as Charles's attorney. Elaine Haverford and Dr. Winters remained at the brownstone with Wolf and Inspector Kramer, where they could be protected and monitored. Kramer had wanted to use Winters as a participant in the sting, but Wolf had vetoed the idea. Winters is already compromised, he'd said. Kuznetsov will expect betrayal from him. What Wolf didn't say, but what I knew he was thinking, was that Winters might still be playing both sides. The curator had cooperated once we had him cornered, but that didn't mean we could trust him. At 6:45, I picked up Charles Haverford in a taxi. He carried a slim briefcase containing the cherrywood box with the original Ravenna set. "Nervous?" I asked as we headed uptown. "Shouldn't I be?" His attempt at nonchalance failed miserably. "I'm being used as bait for a killer. Just follow the script. Wolf knows what he's doing, does he? This Kuznetsov has killed 3 people already. What's to stop him from making it 5? 4 very competent detectives with guns," I assured him, "and the NYPD tactical unit on standby." We met Petrescu in the lobby of Markov's building. Fred Durkin was at the concierge desk, posing as a visitor waiting for a resident. He gave me a slight nod as we passed. "Ready, gentlemen?" I asked. As we entered the elevator. "I still don't understand why I'm doing this," Petrescu muttered. "Diplomatic immunity doesn't stop bullets. You're doing it because your government wants that chess set returned to Romania," I reminded him, "and because you've been cleared of involvement in your cousin's death." That last part was true, technically. Kramer had verified Petrescu's alibi for both murders. But in this business, alibis can be arranged, and Wolf had instructed me to watch both men carefully. Markov's apartment occupied half the 14th floor, a spacious residence with views of the park. Crime scene tape still crossed the entrance, which I removed before unlocking the door with the key Kramer had provided. The apartment had been processed, but signs of violence remained, a blood stain on the Persian carpet, evidence markers scattered around the room. "Charming," Charles said, his face pale. I checked my watch. 6:57. "Take your positions. Remember, stick to the script. We want to draw him out, not spook him." Charles sat at a desk near the window, the briefcase in front of him. Petrescu took an armchair to the side while I positioned myself by the door, checking that my gun was easily accessible under my jacket. At precisely 7, the house phone buzzed. I answered. "Mr. Haverford? There's a Mr. Kuznetsov here to see you." So he was using his own name. Interesting. "Send him up," I said. I alerted Saul via our radio link, then addressed Charles and Petrescu. "He's coming. Stay calm." 3 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a tall, distinguished man in his 50s, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit. His hair was silver at the temples, his face angular and aristocratic. He carried a slim metal attaché case. "Viktor Kuznetsov," he introduced, himself with a slight accent, Eastern European, but polished by years of international business. "And you are?" "James Carlton," I said, using my cover name. "Mr. Haverford's attorney." How cautious. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And Mr. Petrescu. What an unexpected pleasure." "Mr. Kuznetsov?" Petrescu inclined his head. "I represent Romania's interest in the Ravenna set, as executor of my cousin's estate." "Of course you do." Kuznetsov entered the room smoothly, his gaze taking in every detail. I noticed he glanced at the bloodstain without reaction. "Mr. Haverford, I apologize for the change in arrangements. Stefan's unfortunate demise necessitated my direct involvement." "Knew my appointment with Markov?" Charles asked, following the script. "I know many things, Mr. Haverford, including that the set you've brought is not a reproduction, but the original Ravenna set, created in 1498. He set his attaché case on the coffee table. "I'm prepared to offer 2 million, twice what Markov." Proposed? Charles looked appropriately startled. How did you— Your father's deception was clever but not impenetrable. Quality reveals itself to those who know what to look for. Kuznetsov gestured to the briefcase. May I examine the set? First, your credentials, I interjected. Mr. Haverford requires assurance of your ability to complete this transaction. Kuznetsov smiled thinly. Of course. He removed a phone from his pocket, made a brief call, and then handed it to me. My banker in Zurich. He will confirm the funds are ready for immediate wire transfer. I took the phone and heard a professional-sounding voice confirm that $2 million was indeed available in an escrow account. After a brief exchange, I handed the phone back and nodded to Charles. Satisfactory, Charles said, opening his briefcase. He removed the cherrywood box and placed it on the desk. The complete set, as discussed with Mr. Markov. Kuznetsov approached, opening the box with reverent care. His eyes gleamed as he surveyed the 32 ivory pieces. Exquisite. He lifted the Black Knight, examining it from all angles. And this piece? It contains a special feature, does it not? I wouldn't know, Charles replied. My father never mentioned anything beyond its historical significance. A pity? Kuznetsov replaced the knight. Well, everything appears to be in order. Shall we proceed with the transaction? One moment, Petrescu interjected. As the representative of Romania's cultural ministry, I must register an official claim on this set. It was stolen from my family during the war. Kuznetsov's expression hardened slightly. A claim that would take years to litigate, with no guarantee of success. Mr. Haverford has possession, and I'm offering immediate compensation. Perhaps, Petrescu conceded, but any future owner should be aware of the potential complications. The Romanian government will pursue its claim. I'll take that risk. Kuznetsov opened his attaché case, revealing a laptop. If you'll provide your banking details, Mr. Haverford, we can complete the transfer now. As Charles leaned forward to examine the laptop, I caught a small movement from Kuznetsov, his right hand sliding inside his jacket. I tensed, ready to draw my weapon. Before we proceed, came a new voice from the hallway. I believe there are several matters requiring clarification. We all turned to see Nero Wolfe standing in the doorway, flanked by Saul Panzer. Wolfe, who famously never leaves his brownstone except under the most extraordinary circumstances, had decided this qualified. Kuznetsov recovered quickly. I wasn't aware this was a group negotiation. It isn't. Wolfe entered the room, his bulk commanding attention. This is an apprehension, Mr. Kuznetsov, for the murders of Edmund Haverford, Stefan Markov, and Nikolai Baranov. Kuznetsov's face revealed nothing. Serious accusations. You have evidence for these claims? Substantial evidence, including testimony from Dr. Philip Winters regarding your arrangement to acquire both the original Ravenna set and its forged counterpart, along with the documentation establishing provenance. Hearsay from a desperate man. Kuznetsov shrugged elegantly. I'm simply a collector facilitating a private sale. A collector who made a point of sending chess pieces to me, accompanied by threatening notes. Wolfe moved further into the room, though he remained near the door. An unusual approach for a legitimate buyer. I have no idea what you're talking about. Then perhaps you can explain why your fingerprints were found on the packages delivered to my brownstone. That was a bluff. We had no such evidence. But Kuznetsov didn't know that. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Or, Wolfe continued, why your diplomatic vehicle was observed watching Miss Haverford's residence shortly before another chess piece was delivered to her. "I have many business interests in New York," Kuznetsov countered, "and many associates who use vehicles registered to my companies." "Including associates who commit murder?" I asked. Kuznetsov's eyes hardened. "This conversation has become tedious. Mr. Haverford, shall we conclude our business, or would you prefer to entertain these interruptions?" "Actually," Charles said, closing the cherrywood box, "I think I'll need to reconsider my position." "A wise decision," Wolf nodded, "particularly since selling stolen property across international borders carries significant penalties." "Stolen?" Kuznetsov raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Haverford has possessed this set for decades." "Possession is not ownership, as you well know. This set was looted during the war, a fact established by the very documentation you stole from Markov's apartment after murdering him." "These are serious allegations, Mr. Wolf." "Without proof?" "We have proof," Wolf interrupted. "The museum's security cameras captured your associate removing the forged set from the vault last night. An associate who has now been apprehended and is cooperating with authorities." Another bluff, but delivered with such conviction that Kuznetsov's composure finally cracked. His hand moved inside his jacket again. "I wouldn't," Saul said quietly, his own weapon now visible. Kuznetsov froze, then slowly raised his hands. "This is all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding that has left 3 men dead," Wolf said coldly. "Inspector Kramer and his officers are waiting downstairs. You will accompany them to police headquarters, where your diplomatic status will be addressed by individuals with appropriate authority." "You're making a grave mistake," Kuznetsov said, but there was resignation in his voice. "Even if your accusations had merit, you have no jurisdiction here." "Perhaps not," Wolf conceded, "but the FBI does, particularly in matters involving stolen art and murder." On cue, the door opened again and 2 men in suits entered, displaying federal badges. Kramer had come through with his contacts after all. As the agents took Kuznetsov into custody, I noticed his gaze lingering on the cherrywood box. There was something in his eyes, not just defeat, but genuine regret. The look of a man who had come within inches of claiming a prize he had coveted for years. "Mr. Wolf," Kuznetsov said as they led him away, "you should know that set truly is cursed. Every owner meets a violent end. Even Edmund Haverford couldn't escape it." "Superstition," Wolf replied dismissively, "a convenient myth to enhance value and obscure the simpler truth. Greed kills, Mr. Kuznetsov, not cursed objects." After Kuznetsov was gone, Wolf turned to Charles. "The set will need to be secured as evidence." Charles nodded, resigned. "I suppose it never really belonged to my father anyway." "Legally, no. Morally, that is a more complex question." Wolf glanced at Petrescu. "One that will ultimately be decided in courts and diplomatic chambers." Petrescu inclined his head. "Romania will pursue its rightful claim, but we are not unreasonable. The museum's stewardship will be acknowledged. As we gathered our things to leave, I had to ask the question that had been bothering me. Why did you come, sir? You never leave the brownstone." Wolf sighed. "Because, Archie, some games cannot be won by proxy. And because I suspected our adversary had one final move prepared, one that required my personal attention to counter." "You think he was planning to kill all of us?" "Not all, but certainly Mr. Haverford, once the transaction was complete, and possibly Mr. Petrescu, to eliminate Romania's claim." Wolf's gaze lingered on the cherrywood box. "Some prizes inspire extraordinary measures." "Speaking of which," I said, "what about the ruby supposedly hidden in the night?" "Ah, yes. Wolf picked up the Black Knight, examining it again. A convenient legend, but not entirely fictional. With a slight twist of his fingers, something clicked, and a small compartment in the base of the knight opened. Inside, catching the light with blood-red brilliance, was a small ruby. "The drop of blood," Wolf murmured. Cesare Borgia's symbol of loyalty, and the final confirmation of this set's authenticity. As we left Markov's apartment with the chess set secure in the hands of the FBI agents, I couldn't help reflecting on the case. What had begun with a mysterious package had escalated into multiple murders, international art theft, and decades of deception. All over 32 pieces of carved ivory and the stories they carried. The curse of the Ravenna set had claimed 3 more victims. And somehow I suspected they wouldn't be the last. It was nearly 9 o'clock when we all reconvened. In Wolf's office, the brownstone was crowded. Inspector Kramer and Sergeant Stebbins represented official authority. Elaine and Charles Haverford sat side by side, their sibling tensions momentarily suspended. Dr. Winters occupied a corner chair, looking exhausted, but relieved. Anton Petrescu stood by the globe, examining it with diplomatic detachment, and the FBI agents Keller and Morris, maintained a professional presence near the door. Wolf, naturally, was behind his desk where he belonged. Fritz had brought beer, and Wolf was savoring his first glass while everyone waited for him to speak. The cherrywood box containing the Ravenna set sat in front of him like a trophy. "Mr. Kuznetsov has been formally charged," Agent Keller announced, breaking the silence. "His diplomatic connections are proving problematic, but the State Department is involved now." "He'll wiggle out of it," Kramer predicted grimly. "These types always do." "Perhaps," Wolf acknowledged. "But his reputation is destroyed, his operation compromised. Even in circles accustomed to moral flexibility, a triple murderer finds few allies." "You're certain he personally committed the murders?" Petrescu asked. "Not an associate?" "In Edmund Haverford's case, yes. The evidence indicates Kuznetsov himself delivered the fatal blow. For Markov and the embassy aide, he likely employed assistants. The investigation will clarify those details." "What I don't understand," Elaine said, "is why he involved you from the beginning. Why send the chess piece here? Why make it a game?" Wolf set down his beer. "Because, Miss Haverford, Viktor Kuznetsov is not merely a criminal, he is a collector, a connoisseur. For him, the acquisition of the Ravenna set represented the culmination of a decades-long pursuit. A pursuit his father began," I added, "and he inherited." "Precisely. The elder Kuznetsov sold the forgery to the museum in 1957, believing it was the genuine article. Only later did he learn of Edmund Haverford's deception." Wolf's finger traced the rim of his glass. By then, Alexei Kuznetsov had already sold the documentation to Markov's family, claiming it matched the set in the museum. "So there were 3 interested parties," Charles observed. "The museum with its forgery, my father with the original, and the Markov family with the documentation. Each possessing a piece of the puzzle, each unaware of the other's true position." Wolf nodded. "Until Stefan Markov appeared 2 months ago, unwittingly exposing the entire charade." "And Viktor Kuznetsov saw an opportunity," Agent Morris said. "Then an opportunity, a challenge worthy of his skills." Wolf opened the cherrywood box, revealing the ivory pieces nestled in their velvet beds. "Victor styles himself a chess master in the game of acquisition. The chance to orchestrate the retrieval of both sets, the documentation, and the elimination of all witnesses appealed to his sense of aesthetics." "Aesthetics?" Kramer snorted. "The man's a cold-blooded killer." One can be both, Inspector. For Kuznetsov, this operation was his masterpiece, a complex endgame requiring precision, sacrifice, and daring, which explains the chess metaphors, I said. The pieces, the notes, the staging of the murders. Indeed, he was signing his work. Wolf lifted the Black Knight. And he involved me because my authentication would be the final move in his game, the conclusive seal of approval that would maximize the set's value to his ultimate buyer. Who is this buyer? Petrescu asked. My government would be most interested. A Russian oligarch, I suspect, though proving it may be difficult. Someone with resources to pay 8 figures for an artifact with such a storied history. And the curse? Elaine asked, hesitantly. Do you believe there's anything to it? Wolf set the knight down with a dismissive gesture. Superstition is a powerful marketing tool, Miss Haverford. It adds mystique, enhances value, justifies extreme measures. The curse is merely a catalogue of human greed and the violence it inspires. Still, I said, it's quite a body count across the centuries. Valuable objects attract dangerous people, Archie. The correlation is economics, not metaphysics. Kramer cleared his throat. Let's get back to facts. You figured all this out from what exactly? The chess pieces? From inconsistencies, Inspector. When Miss Haverford first described her father's reproduction, I was struck by the improbability. Creating a perfect forgery requires extraordinary skill, yet Edmund Haverford supposedly did it merely as a personal trophy. Unlikely. The simpler explanation was that he acquired the original and created a forgery for the museum. But you needed proof, I prompted, which arrived when you confirmed the distinctive features of the reproduction matched Markov's documentation exactly. Features like the repaired knight and the cracked rook, details too specific to be coincidental. The only logical conclusion was that Haverford possessed the original, and once you knew that, Charles said, you could work backward to everything else. With assistance, Wolf acknowledged. Dr. Winters provided crucial context about Edmund Haverford's relationship with Alexei Kuznetsov and the museum's acquisition. Practices, Winters shifted uncomfortably. I never thought it would lead to murder. Few conspiracies anticipate their ultimate consequences, Wolf replied. You created conditions for exploitation, and Kuznetsov exploited them ruthlessly. What happens to the set now? Elaine asked, eyeing the cherrywood box. Agent Keller answered, It's evidence in multiple homicides, so it remains in federal custody for now. Eventually, ownership will be determined through legal channels. Romania has the strongest claim, Petrescu asserted. The documentation proves the set was stolen from my family during the war. Documentation which is also evidence, Agent Morris reminded him, and which may itself have a questionable chain of custody. The museum will fight any claim, Winters predicted. Decades of exhibition, scholarly study, publication, they'll argue for cultural patrimony. They'll argue for cultural patrimony. A legal battle that will last years, Charles said with a sigh. Father would be amused. He kept the genuine article hidden for 6 decades, and now that it's discovered, it disappears into evidence lockers and courtrooms. Justice grinds slowly, Wolf observed, but it grinds exceedingly fine. Kramer stood, pocketing his unlit cigar. Well, the immediate case is closed. Kuznetsov is in custody, the threat neutralized. The rest is for lawyers and diplomats. He looked at Wolf with grudging respect. You did good work, Wolf, even if you're still claiming you didn't take the case. Wolf's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. I merely pursued a matter of personal interest, Inspector. When someone delivers mysterious packages to my home and involves me in a homicide, my curiosity is naturally piqued. Naturally? Kramer snorted. Well, whatever you call it, it's wrapped up now. Goodwin, I'll need your statement tomorrow. As the group began dispersing, Charles approached Wolfe's desk. Mr. Wolfe, I should thank you. If Kuznetsov had succeeded in his plan, he would likely be dead, and the set would be en route to Moscow. Wolfe finished bluntly. Gratitude is unnecessary, but a word of advice might be welcome. Yes? Legacy is constructed from actions, not possessions. Your father built 2 legacies, one public and admirable, one private and compromised. Consider carefully which you wish to preserve. Charles looked startled, then thoughtful. I'll consider that. After everyone had gone except Petrescu, the diplomat approached Wolfe. A moment of your time, Mr. Wolfe. If it's brief. It's nearly time for my orchids. Petrescu smiled thinly. I merely wish to convey my government's appreciation for your assistance in recovering a national treasure. When the legal matters are resolved, we would be honored to have you visit Romania as our guest. That's most kind, but I rarely travel, so I've heard. Nevertheless, the invitation stands. Petrescu's eyes moved to the knight, still sitting on Wolfe's desk. That piece with its hidden compartment, a fascinating detail, wouldn't you agree? The ruby, you mean? Yes, quite fascinating. Not just the ruby, Petrescu said softly. The symbolism, a knight, loyal, strategic, capable of unexpected moves, much like yourself, Mr. Wolfe. You flatter me, sir. Not at all. I recognize excellence when I encounter it. Petrescu bowed slightly. Good evening, gentlemen. After he'd gone, I turned to Wolfe. He's fishing to see if you kept the ruby. Of course he is. Wolfe looked amused. Diplomats always negotiate, even when nothing is on the table. Did you? Keep the ruby, I mean? Archie, really? Wolfe looked offended. To misappropriate evidence in a federal investigation would be unconscionable. Right. Stupid question. He reached for his book, signaling that the case was closed. But as I turned to go, he added, however, if one were to examine that particular night very carefully, one might discover that the hidden compartment has more than one section. Cesare Borgia was not a man who placed all his trust in a single secret. I stared at him. You're saying there's another ruby? I'm saying nothing of the sort. Merely making an observation about Renaissance craftsmanship and the paranoia of the Borgia family. His eyes returned to his book, but there was the slightest upward curve to his lips. The FBI's evidence technicians will no doubt make a thorough examination. No doubt, I agreed, fighting a smile of my own. The case of the ivory chessman was closed. Viktor Kuznetsov was in custody, the Ravenna set secured, and justice, of a sort, had been served. There would be legal battles ahead, diplomatic maneuvers, perhaps even attempts to revive the curse narrative for public consumption. But those were concerns for others. For Nero Wolfe, it was time for orchids. And perhaps, though he would never admit it, a moment of quiet satisfaction at a game well played. A week later, life at the brownstone had largely returned to its comfortable routine. Wolfe was in the plant rooms with Theodore every morning and afternoon, attending to his orchids with his usual devotion. Fritz was experimenting with a new dish involving quail and truffles. I was catching up on paperwork and correspondence that had been neglected during the Ravenna set affair. The morning papers still carried occasional updates about the case. Viktor Kuznetsov was fighting extradition, claiming diplomatic immunity through some Byzantine connection to a minor Eastern European consulate. The FBI had recovered the forged chess set from a storage locker near the Russian embassy. The Metropolitan Museum was preparing a legal defense of its claim to the original set. Romania had filed a formal request for repatriation of a stolen cultural treasure. Editorials debated the ethics of museums acquiring looted art during and after World War II. None of it seemed to interest Woolf much. Once a case was solved, his attention invariably moved on, usually to food, orchids, or books. I was about to head out for lunch when the doorbell rang. When I answered it, I found Elaine Haverford on the stoop, looking more composed than when we'd last seen her. "Miss Haverford," I greeted her. "This is a pleasant surprise." "Mr. Goodwin, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all. Please come in." I escorted her to the office, where Woolf was reading a new botanical monograph. He looked up as we entered, inclining his head a fraction of an inch in greeting. "Miss Haverford, to what do we owe the pleasure?" "I wanted to deliver this in person." She placed an envelope on his desk. "The agreed-upon fee for your services." Woolf raised an eyebrow. "I did not take your case, Miss Haverford. No fee is necessary. You solved my father's murder and prevented my brother from making a catastrophic mistake. Whether you officially took the case or not, you earned this." Her tone brooked no argument. Woolf considered the envelope, then nodded slightly. "Very well, thank you." I had expected more resistance from him, but perhaps he recognized the gesture for what it was, not just payment, but acknowledgement. "How is your brother?" I asked. "Chastened," she said with a small smile, "and surprisingly constructive. He's working with the museum's board to establish a fund for investigating the provenance of questionable acquisitions. It seems your advice about legacies made an impression, Mr. Woolf." "I'm gratified to hear it," Woolf replied. "And Dr. Winters?" "Cooperating with authorities. He'll lose his position, of course, but in exchange for his testimony against Kuznetsov and others involved in the trafficking network, he may avoid criminal charges." "A fair resolution," Woolf pronounced. "And your own plans, Miss Haverford?" She took a deep breath. "I've accepted a position with the Holocaust Art Restitution Project. They work to return looted art to the original owners or their descendants." "Commendable," Woolf said, with what might have been genuine approval. "Your father's expertise in forgery detection would be valuable in such work. I imagine you inherited some of his knowledge." "More than I realized," she admitted. "Going through his papers, I found notebooks, techniques, observations about materials and age-long methods. In the right context, that knowledge can serve justice rather than deception." "Indeed," Woolf nodded. "Redemption through application of inherited skills to worthy causes. Most fitting." As I showed her out after a few more minutes of conversation, she paused at the door. "There's something else you should know, Mr. Goodwin. The museum is conducting a thorough audit of all acquisitions from Kuznetsov's father. They've already identified 8 pieces with questionable provenance." That's going to be messy," I predicted. "Yes, but necessary." Her eyes were clear and determined. "The truth has a way of surfacing eventually, doesn't it? Even after decades." "In my experience, yes," I agreed, especially when Nero Wolfe gets involved. Later that afternoon, I drove downtown to deliver some documents to Lon Cohen at the Gazette. As usual, he pumped me for inside details on the Ravenna set case. "Come on, Archie," he cajoled. "Give me something my competitors don't have." "What about this curse business? Any truth to it?" "Just clever marketing for expensive chess pieces," I told him, repeating Wolf's assessment. "Though if you knew how many people have died over that set across 5 centuries, you might think twice about collecting antiques." "That's not bad," Lon said, scribbling a note. "Might use that. What about the ruby? The FBI's being tight-lipped." "Official channels are your best bet there," I said innocently. Right, he snorted. Because you and Wolf always defer to official channels. He studied me for a moment. You know something? I know lots of things, Lon. It's part of my charm. I left him grumbling and headed back uptown. It was nearly 4, which meant Wolf would be ascending to the plant rooms for his afternoony session with the orchids. I planned to use the time to type up my final report on the case. When I entered the office, however, I found Wolf still at his desk, the cherrywood box open before him. Inside was a single chess piece, a black knight, identical to the one now. In FBI custody, he was examining it with a magnifying glass. Something interesting, sir? I asked. Merely an academic exercise, Archie. He set down the glass. Mr. Petrescu paid me a visit while you were out. A diplomatic courtesy, he called it. And left you a souvenir? I nodded at the knight. A replica. Quite good, though not of the same vintage as the original. He suggested I might enjoy having a memento of the case. Generous of him. Calculating, Wolf corrected. He wanted to observe my reaction to see if I would notice it was not the original piece. And did you? Instantly. The weight is wrong, and the carving technique is modern despite the artificial aging. He closed the box. I complimented his government's craftsmanship naturally. Naturally. I sat at my desk. Any other diplomatic insights from Petrescu? He informed me that the matter of the Ravenna set's ownership will likely be resolved through a compromise. The museum will acknowledge Romania's legitimate claim, but retain physical custody as the official caretaker. An elegant solution. Everybody saves face, I nodded. What about Kuznetsov? Facing extradition to 3 countries, each with charges, sufficient to ensure he spends his remaining years in confinement. His network is being dismantled by a joint task force. Wolf looked pleased in his understated way. A satisfactory conclusion. The phone rang, and I answered to find Charles Haverford on the line. After a brief conversation, I relayed his message to Wolf. He says Inspector Kramer is pressing him about something missing from the chess set. Apparently, the FBI's examination revealed that the hidden compartment in the night had been recently opened. Charles wants to know if we have any insights. How curious, Wolf murmured, not meeting my eyes. You may tell Mr. Haverford that his father's secrets are not our concern. The case is closed. After the call, I looked at Wolf questioningly. The case may be closed, but I get the feeling some questions remain open. In life, Archie, closure is rarely absolute. There are always loose threads, unresolved implications. He reached for his current book. The key is knowing which threads require attention and which may be left to dangle harmlessly. And the ruby, does that dangle harmlessly? He didn't answer directly. I have been thinking about your earlier question regarding curses. While I dismiss supernatural explanations, there is something to be said for the power of objects to influence human behavior. Valuable items inspire greed, greed leads to deception, deception escalates to violence. The cycle perpetuates itself across generations. Pretty philosophical for a Tuesday afternoon, I remarked. Perhaps. He opened his book. Or perhaps merely an observation on human nature. The true Ravenna set will reside in a museum, studied and admired, but ultimately safe behind glass, a fitting end to its violent history. And if there was a second ruby, hypothetically? Wolf turned a page. Hypothetically, Archie, such an item divorced from the chess set with no documentation of its existence would be merely a gemstone. Valuable, certainly, but without the fatal magnetism of the complete historical artifact. So the curse would be broken. There is no curse, Wolf said firmly, only human avarice and its consequences. I let it drop, knowing I'd get nothing more from him. But later that evening after dinner, Fritz's quail with truffles had been a triumph. Wolf did something unusual. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small velvet pouch which he handed to me. "Your 10%, he said, casually. "For services rendered." Inside the pouch was a small, perfectly cut ruby, glinting with dark fire in the lamplight. "I'm not going to ask where this came from," I said, admiring it. "A wise approach." Wolf nodded approvingly. "Consider it a bonus for your exceptional work on a case I didn't take." I pocketed the gem, understanding the unspoken message. The Ravenna set would remain intact in the museum, its provenance and history preserved for scholars and the public. The FBI had found what they expected in the knight's secret compartment. Cesare Borgia's second hidden treasure, his true insurance, would remain our little secret. Some mysteries, after all, are better left unsolved. The curse of the Ravenna set was ended. Its pieces would no longer inspire murder and theft. But as I sat across from Wolf while he read his book, savoring his beer and his orchids and his comfortable routine, I couldn't help but wonder about all the other treasures out there. Ancient artifacts with blood-soaked histories, precious items that drive men to kill. I had a feeling we hadn't seen the last of such cases, but that was a concern for another day. For now, the game was over and Nero Wolfe had won, even if he insisted he'd never really been playing.